Welcome to the Deck Diaries. In this series, I will share with you my personal experiences with the decks in my collection. Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today we are going to be chatting about the Anna K Tarot. One of the most used decks on my tarot council is the Anna K Tarot. This deck, as I mentioned in that tarot tag, fulfills the role of family counselor in my collection. The Anna K is a deck grounded in the realities of what it means to truly be human. It is a deck that stays true to the Waite-Smith tradition, but strips away much of the esoteric symbolism to focus on the powerful story of being human. The Anna K is a deck conjured from the imagination. 10 years in the making, its realistic art style flows with emotional energy. As the author states in the guidebook, with my cards, if someone is angry, sad, or happy, you'll see their face contort with this emotion, just like a real person's face. The Anna K Tarot is a deck that mirrors the human condition. So the Anna K Tarot is a tarot deck that I use primarily for family readings or relationship readings. And when I say relationships, I don't necessarily mean romantic relationships, because for me, this is not really a deck attuned to that kind of reading. For me, this is more a deck attuned to relationships in general, or more, as I use it, more geared towards family readings. So when I work with this deck, I am usually working with this deck in a 3-card reading where I am looking at what is going on in the particular family situation that I'm doing the reading on. So what's going on, what do I need to know, and what can I do to help resolve the situation? That is generally how I work with this deck. So generally I have, what's going on, what do I need to know, and how can I resolve the situation? And that tends to be how I work with this deck. Now, occasionally I will pull in various oracles as well to help sort of expand upon this message or to maybe wrap up the message. But oftentimes that is what I am looking for, is just what's going on, what do I need to know, and how do I fix it? That's usually what I'm after. Sometimes I do expand it to be, more of a 5-card reading, so I'm just expanding it to learn more about the situation. And a lot of times I like to do a kind of what's going on the surface and then what's going on underneath it. So for that particular reading, I may lay out 3 cards to start with. Whoops. And that kind of gives me an overview of what's going on, like on the surface of the situation. This is things as they are. This is what I'm aware of, or what other people are aware of. And then I will lay down another 3 cards underneath to determine what is going on underneath that. So it's kind of a, conscious realm, subconscious realm. So this is generally in the context of situations. So I tend to use the Anna K very situationally to help me find solutions, to help me think outside of the box, to help me understand what is going on underneath all of that, because family issues are very complicated. Or I guess I should say they can be for most of us. They are quite complicated issues. And so a lot of times I use these type of readings. It's basically a 3-card reading showing me the conscious and the subconscious. So what's going on the surface, and then what is going on underneath that. Because when we're talking about relationships and we're talking about people, there's always something going on beneath the surface. Things are pretty much never as they appear right from, right on the surface level. Sure, that's included, but there's always more going on underneath. And that is one of the things that the Anna K for me is really attuned to tapping into, is that, here's what's going on right now. Here's what we know. Okay. And then here is what is lingering beneath all of that. And sometimes these are things that are influencing what's going on the conscious realm, on the surface level. Sometimes it's things that are affecting it, not necessarily contributing to it, not necessarily the cause, but it's things that are definitely influencing the situation. You know, sometimes it very much can be, this is the underlying cause of this. If we look at this situation here, we can see that maybe somebody is in conflict because they need help and they're not asking for it. So that would be a situation of where this particular card would show me sort of the root cause of the conflict. You know, whereas here we may see that somebody is, you know, in need of rest and to recuperate and to take that time off to really stabilize those energies that they need in their life, to get their mind back in order so that they can start on that next journey. So in this case, we would see that the current situation, or the outside of the situation, what's going on the surface, is that this person needs to take some time to rebalance their mind, to get their thoughts in order so that they can begin on this new journey. And if we look at here in terms of maybe what is just influencing, so here we had kind of the root cause. Here we have what needs to happen so that they can move on to the next phase, which is what that underlying drive or that underlying issue is. And then here we could look at this situation as, this is what is influencing the outside situation or the surface situation. So here we have the Seven of Pentacles, where we're looking at trying to harvest, trying to grow things. This inner work influences what we're trying to cultivate and grow on the surface level. And I think that this particular deck works really well for tapping into relationships and working with people in general, because this is an extremely expressive deck. So one of the things that people tend to point out about this deck is that the faces are a little bit funny. And at first that was kind of it kind of threw me too. Also, the aces depict scenes, which I actually quite like, versus just having, the single element or the single symbol that we tend to see on these cards. And I think that this is just a nice change of pace. And for me, this is a very human deck. And I believe the creator does even mention that in her guidebook, that, these faces, these people were created, were drawn to reflect the emotion. And when we're talking about emotions, that's a huge part of relationships and working with other people. And it's just, for me, the expression on the faces, the very down to earth kind of really human energy about this deck. It is imperfect. I mean, I'm not going to say that this is a perfect deck. It is imperfect. The artwork is imperfect. But that is one of the things that I really like about this deck, because people are imperfect. Humans are flawed. And this deck to me represents that imperfectness of being human. We have, lovely situations going on here, but things might not always be 100% perfect. If this were three absolutely stunning, gorgeous women, and, it was this beautiful scene and it looked perfect, that's not really a real representation of being human. No matter how beautiful things look on the surface, there is always things going on underneath that lead to that imperfection. And I don't mean imperfection in a negative way, because being imperfect is beautiful in its own right, and people are beautiful in their own right. But let's face it, life is messy, people are messy, and relationships are messy. And that's the thing that I really like about this deck, is that it really taps into that, the realistic nature of what it means to be human, what it means to have relationships and connect with ourselves as well as other people. And that is one of the things that I really appreciate about this deck, and why I think it works so well for me for family readings. And to be perfectly honest with you, this deck is almost exclusively used in family readings for me. So readings to deal with my immediate family, my extended family, in some cases, even my friends that are like family, because, we have varying levels of friendship as well. Some of them are closer than others. And for those friendships that, are very close, family-like, tends to also be the deck that I go to for that. So for me, the imperfections, the kind of funny little faces that we sometimes see in this deck, for me, really tap into that human nature. And that is really what makes this deck so special and so attuned to those type of readings for me. I do also I have actually 2 copies of the Anna K. And I have this copy that I have trimmed, and I did show in my previous deck diary video with the Llewellyn Tarot. This deck has been intentionally trimmed to be the same size as my trimmed Llewellyn. And of course, I've taken all the titles off. And in some cases, some of the, number of the suit symbols have been cut off. But I know these scenes so well that I don't need them to know what card it is. And that is just part of working with the deck for so long and so much that I'm very attuned to what these cards are without necessarily having the 9 swords in the scene. I still know that's the 9 of swords. Part of that is because it is, a Waite-Smith inspired deck. So we definitely get those traditional images in there, and part of it is just knowing the deck so well that I can look at that and know what scene is being depicted and what card that represents. So this is another version of the Anna K, and I specifically only use it for a reading that I do along with my Llewellyn. So this is the one that comes out only during that time. So now I thought we'd just take a quick flip through the deck, and I want to point out some of my favorite cards in this deck and some of the reasons that I really like them. I do like this 4 of Swords. We definitely get that sense of rest and retreat. But this one, I think with the imagery also lends it to being open to maybe that rest and retreat is because things aren't going so well. It's not necessarily that, you just need to take a break. This could be, you're really down. You need to really take some time to figure things out, to get, your mind rebalanced. And, it can also be somebody's sick. And again, when we're talking about family readings and in terms of working with this deck with other people, this could be an actual illness in the family. And so I think that that's, really great about this particular deck. One of the things I really love about this deck is this 10 of Swords, and I'm glad it came up fairly quickly because I don't read the 10 of Swords as an ending. I read the 10 of Swords as the culmination of all of the lesson learned in the Suit of Swords and the making that next step or being ready to take that next step to the next level. So basically when we reach the 10, we've reached the culmination, we've reached the pinnacle, you've learned all the lessons, and now we're going to move on to the next phase. And I love this depiction because this person, yes, there is some blood here. They are definitely wounded, but they are not out for the count. They have gotten up and they are moving on. They've learned their lessons and they're ready to get on to the next phase. And I love that depiction of the 10 of Swords in this deck. And it's one of the reasons why I purchased this deck. Because to be perfectly honest with you, I was a little unsure about the artwork with the little faces, but really that has become one of the things that I most enjoy about this deck. And the faces to me are so endearing now, and they are so sweet, and they just really help to tap into the emotional energy that comes through this deck. Beautiful High Priestess. I do really like the Emperor. I like the stability and the structure of him. I think he's definitely somebody that, is of authority, but somebody that you could depend on for sure. I think the Fool is quite cute. There are a lot of androgynous beings in this deck that, you're not quite sure whether they're male or female. And I actually quite like that because I think it really opens it up to interpretation based on the context of your reading. And I do really like the aces in this deck, like I said before, because they kind of show a scene that really encapsulates the energy of the suit itself, which I think is really lovely. And here we see, some definite tapping into that Waite-Smith structure, which I think is nice as well. Love this sun. This is again another one of my favorite cards in the deck. To me, this card really encapsulates the energy of the sun. It has the gorgeous sunflowers, this beautiful landscape, and front and center is this glorious glowing sun. And to me, this is joy and happiness. This looks like my happy place. And that for me really encapsulates the whole energy of the sun. So I think that's really beautiful. I think the strength card is really nice in this deck too. I do see that the lion, and I like that it's a lioness. I do believe, don't quote me on that, but it's not it doesn't have the big mane like the male lion. So I assume it's a lioness, which I really like because it's just something a little bit different. We do see the collar with the chain around the lioness's neck. But for me, when I look at this, I read this card as she is releasing the lion from those bonds. So she's engaging that wild inner self. And she's letting it free because it's a part of her. And she's going to let it, free and be out into the world and be a representation of her as well. So it's kind of like a mastering of your kind of wild nature, your inner animal, so to speak, but it's also freeing it. It's letting that be a strength for you, not something that you need to, kind of lock away. Again, the context or the interpretations for these cards really change based on the context of the reading. So, but these are just things that pop into my mind whenever I see these cards as I'm just flipping through the decks. I love this Six of Cups. It's very dreamy. It's very almost storybook, and I think it's beautiful. And there are a lot of cards in this deck that I really do like. I don't think that there is many cards that I don't care for in this deck. This Five of Swords is a little bit confrontational for me. Yes, I do see the five as being a number of conflict, and swords of being of the mind. So this would definitely be a conflict of the mind. So we could definitely read this more as, it's metaphorical. That's how I see it. This is not somebody literally threatening the lives of these children or these young people here. This is all the ego-based thoughts that really kind of keep us crouched in fear and don't let us move on. To me, that's how I read the fives, and that's how I read this particular image, not so much as a literal scene, but more as a metaphor for what goes on in the mind. I love this hermit. I think he's absolutely gorgeous. I love that, he's an older gentleman. We see that the candle, it's been burning for a long time. So we can see the candle wax dripping down here. This candle's been burning for a while. And this to me reminds us that it takes time to do that inner work, right? It takes time. You need time in the hermit phase to be able to learn the lessons and move on. I do quite like this Queen of Swords. She is very stiff. And she doesn't have a ton of expression on her face, but I think she is very indicative of the Queen of Swords and that very logical, no-nonsense energy, which I think is really great. This Death card is one that doesn't quite thrill me so much, and it's just the whole idea of the angel energy that really doesn't resonate. And this, again, is just another one of those cards that kind of missed the mark a little bit for me, and it's mostly due to the perspective in the body. But for the most part, this deck is one that I really enjoy working with. I think it's absolutely, it's an absolutely beautiful deck in its own way. And as I said, it really, for me, embodies the imperfectness of being human. And that's one of the reasons why I like to really use this deck as a source for family readings in particular for me. I think it's also a very grounded deck and a very, I love this world card too. It's a very grounded deck, I think. And I think it would work very well for decks to kind of bring you back to center, like in those times where things are really kind of chaotic and just, more than you can handle at that moment. I think that this would be a great deck to kind of ground you back into reality. Here's what's going on. This deck is kind of no nonsense. It's not fluffy. It's not sweet. It's more of a neutral deck in terms in that way, but it is, I think, very expressive and very full of emotion. but I don't think that it adds a lot of esoteric or really even heavily symbolic energy. It's just very nature based, very natural, very grounded in the earth, and very grounded in reality, as much as a tarot deck can be, I should say. But I think it's just a really beautiful deck, and it works really well for me in that sense. And I think now I have flipped through all the cards, so a lot of people have had issue with the Empress, and I kind of quite like her because to me she looks very real. She definitely looks like she is someone, I mean, her face is a little bit funny and things like that, but you know, we all have those imperfections. So I think that she is an Empress that we can really connect with. She's not a green mother or, you know, an Empress who's indicative of the Mother Earth energy. She is more of an Empress in the sort of old school Marseille style Empresses, as in an earthly ruler, which is really where the Empress came from. And I think that she's really beautiful in her own way. And I think that she looks to me to be very real, but also very approachable. So that's one of the things I really like about her. So now I've kind of rambled on for a while about the Anna K Tarot and how I use it. I do just want to make a quick mention to the usability of the deck. And I think that sometimes we get caught up in the whole cardstock, you know, packaging thing. And this deck has, I think, what we would consider old Llewellyn cardstock. This is a Llewellyn deck. And it is quite thin and flexible and glossy, but this deck shuffles beautifully, and I really enjoy working with it. It's actually a great size. So for me, I can actually get my hands all the way around this deck, and I can shuffle it. And there are times when I have taken this deck and I've just sat and shuffled it because it's just a joy to shuffle. And I don't, to be perfectly honest, have a lot of decks in my collection that I can say are a joy to shuffle. And I know I'm probably going to get kicked out of the tarot world for saying this, but the decks that I feel that way about tend to be my Llewellyn decks, because a thick cardstock, you can't do that with. It doesn't have this kind of bend and give and you know. Anyway, I just wanted to make a quick note about that this deck, I think, is really, it's quite wonderful in terms of its, in my opinion, in terms of its production value. The printing is wonderful. It does have these black borders, which I have considered taking off, but you know, they really don't bother me. If they were white, they would be coming off, but the black doesn't bother me. I have edged it in black, so it does not come this way. And the backs, I think, are really lovely. And it is a bit glossy. Maybe I could pick up the window glare there, but it doesn't, it's not so glossy that it impedes your ability to work with it, or, you know, if you want to take pictures of it on Instagram or do videos with it or things like that. It holds up pretty well to that kind of work. So that is a look at my Anna K Tarot and how I use it. The Anna K actually comes with a pretty nice little guidebook. It has nice big images, although they are black and white. And it has a lovely little intro about tarot, a short history of tarot, and tarot's origins and uses, about the deck. And this is where the author talks about the structure of the deck, which is interesting. Reading the cards. And then we go into the information about each of the cards. So there is the big picture over here. There's a little bit about each of the cards. And it really is just kind of a brief blurb. And sometimes you get this little tip where it compares some of the cards to each other. Like here we have the Magician being the opposite experience of the Wheel of Fortune. So it's really kind of interesting. There's lots of little space here for notes if you find that helpful. And we have pretty much the same layout for the minors as we do the majors. So it's actually, it's a nice little guidebook. It's definitely something that would get you started working with this deck. There are a couple spreads in the back, which are nice. So we have a relationship and friendship spread, which I've actually done a couple times, and it's really quite a nice one to use. So that is just a quick look at the Anna Kay Tarot Guidebook. The Anna Kay Tarot, named after its author, is currently published by Llewellyn. It was first self-published in 2009, and you can still purchase the indie edition directly from the author's website. This particular set is the second printing from 2018 by Llewellyn. At the time of this recording, it is still widely available, and you will find purchase links in the description box below. Thank you for joining me for this look at the Anna Kay Tarot. I would love to know your thoughts on this deck, so please feel free to share with me in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video and will join me again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.